I said, absolutely not.
You said no.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Because I was terrified to do it because it goes out live.
You don't have what you had. You don't have much time.
She sold over 120 million records, danced across stadium stages in flowing black shawls, and gave the world some of the most haunting songs ever written. To fans, Stevie Nicks looked untouchable. But behind the fame and glitter was a life filled with secrets the public never truly saw. At 77, the woman once called the Queen of Rock and Roll is living with regrets that never faded, a marriage that collapsed in just 3 months, the child she never had, and a shocking addiction that stole 8 years of her life after one doctor's prescription changed everything. The woman the world envied was secretly fighting battles so dark that even the people closest to her feared she would never recover. And today, the way Stevie Nicks lives is not what fans expected at all. The childhood that created Stevie Nicks. Stevie Nicks was born Stephanie Lynn Nicks on May 26, 1948, in Phoenix, Arizona. From the very start, she had a habit of turning everything into music. As a toddler, she could not even say her own name properly. The closest she could get was TD, which her family eventually softened into the nickname Stevie. It stuck for the rest of her life. Her father worked as a vice president for the Greyhound Bus Company, which meant the family was constantly moving. Phoenix, Albuquerque, El Paso, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Stevie grew up as the new kid in town over and over again. Most children would have struggled with that. Stevie turned it into fuel. Every new city meant new music on the radio, new sounds coming through the walls of whatever house they were renting that month. By the time she was in 5th grade, her grandfather had already handed her a crate of around 150 vinyl records. Country, rockabilly, R&B, Everly Brothers. She listened to all of them obsessively. For her 16th birthday, her parents gave her a Goya guitar. Within weeks, she had written her very first song, titled I've Loved and I've Lost, and I'm Sad But Not Blue, which, honestly, could be the title of her entire autobiography. When the family landed in California, Stevie ended up at Menlo Atherton High School in Atherton. That is where she first heard a lanky young guitarist named Lindsey Buckingham playing California Dreamin' at a church youth group. She walked over and joined him in harmony without being asked. Buckingham later said he was stunned. And just like that, the most complicated musical partnership in rock history had begun. Waitress by day, rock star by night. The road from that church gathering to the top of the charts was not glamorous. Stevie and Lindsey moved in together, recorded an album together in 1973 called Buckingham Nicks, and watched it go absolutely nowhere. Nobody bought it. The record label dropped them. Lindsey came down with mononucleosis. The money dried up completely. Stevie started waiting tables at a restaurant to pay the bills. She also cleaned the house of a music producer named Keith Olsen, the same man who had helped them record their album. She scrubbed floors and washed dishes while dreaming of stadiums. That is how close Stevie Nicks came to never making it, one bad year away from disappearing into an ordinary life. Then, in late 1974, Mick Fleetwood heard the Buckingham Nicks album by accident while visiting Keith Olsen's studio. He was so blown away by Lindsey's guitar playing that he offered Lindsey a spot in Fleetwood Mac. Lindsey said he would only join if Stevie came too. Mick Fleetwood said yes. And with that phone call, everything changed. By 1975, Fleetwood Mac released a self-titled album that went to #1. Stevie's song Rhiannon became a cultural moment. Her live performances of it were so intense that Mick Fleetwood once called them like watching an exorcism. Landslide, another one of her songs from that same album, went on to receive more than 3 million radio airplays. The girl who used to clean a producer's house was now the queen of rock and roll. Then came 1977 and the Rumors album, which became one of the best-selling records in the history of music, certified 21 times platinum in the United States alone. While the album was being recorded, the band was completely falling apart on a personal level. Stevie and Lindsay had broken up. Bandmates John and Christine McVie were going through a divorce. Mick Fleetwood's marriage was crumbling. They were all living through heartbreak in real time, and every single bit of it went straight into the music. Most bands would have collapsed under that kind of pressure. Fleetwood Mac made it their greatest strength. But there was a cost to all of it that fans watching from the outside could not fully see. Stevie has talked openly about how substance became a part of life on the road during those years. The whole band was using it. Bottle caps full of substance would be left on stage, on top of amplifiers, just off to the side in a tent. Stevie has said that eventually she became the worst substance addict among all of them, which, given what the rest of the band was doing, is saying quite a lot. The substance burned a physical hole in the septum of her nose. Doctors would eventually tell her that if she did not stop, she would face serious, permanent health damage. At the end of her Rock a Little tour in 1986, Stevie checked herself into the Betty Ford Clinic. She has been clear about this. Nobody pushed her in. She made that decision herself. The pill that stole 8 years. When Stevie walked out of the Betty Ford Clinic in 1986, she felt fantastic. Clean, healthy, and ready to rebuild. But the people around her were nervous. They were convinced she would relapse. They pushed her hard to go see a psychiatrist. Stevie eventually gave in just to stop the pressure. She walked into the doctor's office feeling, in her own words, buoyant and saved. What happened next changed the rest of her life in ways that substance never did. The psychiatrist told her he wanted to put her on a medication called Klonopin, a powerful tranquilizer in the same family as Valium, to keep her nerves calm and help her stay off substance. Stevie agreed, mostly to get everyone to stop worrying about her. Klonopin is the kind of medication that does not announce itself loudly. It creeps. It is so subtle that at first you barely notice it working. But slowly, it rewires you. Stevie has described what happened to her as watching her own personality dissolve. Her creativity, the thing that had defined her entire life, went quiet. The music stopped coming. The journals stopped filling up. The woman who had written Rhiannon and Gold Dust Woman and Dreams could not write a single line. She went from 123 pounds to nearly 170 pounds. She described herself as a zombie, as a vegetable. She has said the 45-day hospital detox she eventually had to go through to get off. Klonopin felt like someone had opened a door and pushed her straight into hell. The years between roughly 1986 and 1994 are, by her own account, almost completely lost to her. She went back to rehab in 1993 specifically for the Klonopin addiction. When she finally came out the other side, she looked back at her 40s and felt a grief she still carries today. She has spoken about this moment of clarity with a sharpness that makes it land hard. She said the only thing she would ever change about her entire life is walking into that psychiatrist's office. She has said those 8 years were her prime years, and that during them she might have met someone, might have had a family, might have had a baby. The baby that never came, and the story nobody tells completely. This is the part that makes Stevie's story genuinely sad. Stevie Nicks has never had children. She has never tried to hide that fact, and she has talked about it in interviews for decades. The explanation she most often gives is Fleetwood Mac, that she could not have done both, that the band needed everything she had. But the full picture is more complicated and more painful than that. Back in 1979, while Fleetwood Mac was at the height of their fame, Stevie got pregnant. She was in an on and off relationship with Eagles singer Don Henley at the time. Despite being protected by an IUD, she conceived. Fleetwood Mac was only 3 years into their explosive rise. They were heading into their third album. Stevie made the decision to end the pregnancy. She has spoken about it publicly and has been consistent in saying it was the right decision for where she was in her life and career at the time. But the story does not end there. Years later, when Stevie was in her late 30s and early 40s, she genuinely wanted a baby. She said it in interviews repeatedly. She talked about wanting to adopt a little girl, even picked out a name, Lillian Rebecca. She said she wanted 1 or 2 children. She imagined a man walking into her life who could handle being with someone like her. That man never came. The adoption never happened. The Klonopin years ate through her 40s, and by the time she was fully herself again, that window had quietly closed. She has admitted, at various points over the years, that this is her one real regret. Not Fleetwood Mac, not substance, not the broken relationships, the children she never had. She once said the fact that she was old enough to have grown children around her but was completely alone was something that truly devastated her. Later in life, she pivoted, as strong people do. She told herself a different story. She said that maybe she always knew she was meant to be in Fleetwood Mac, that the music she made was a kind of mission, that it healed people in ways that could not be counted. She released a song in 2024 called The Lighthouse, a deeply personal track about reproductive rights and personal choice, and performed it on Saturday Night Live. It was, in a way, her making peace with the choices she never fully chose. Love, loss, and a 3-month marriage. Stevie Nicks has only been married once in her entire life, and the circumstances of that marriage are one of the most emotionally complex moments in her whole story. Her best friend was a woman named Robin Anderson. Robin was her closest companion, her confidant, the person she called when everything else fell apart. In 1981, on the very same day that Stevie's solo album Belladonna reached #1 on the charts, what should have been the greatest day of her professional life, she got a phone call telling her that Robin had leukemia. Robin was also pregnant at the time and was given only 3 months to live. Robin fought hard enough to give birth to a son, making Stevie the baby's godmother. Then Robin died in 1982. Stevie was shattered. In her grief, she did something that surprised everyone around her. She married Robin's widower, Kim Anderson, just a few months after Robin passed. Stevie has explained that she believed Robin would have wanted her to take care of the baby, that she and Kim were both so deep in grief that the marriage felt like the only way to hold on to Robin. She has called that entire period completely deranged, not as an insult to herself, but as an honest description of what losing Robin did to her mind and heart. The marriage lasted 3 months. They divorced quietly. Stevie has stayed in contact with both Kim and Robin's son, Matthew, ever since, and she considers Matthew her stepson to this day. It is one of the most tender and overlooked parts of her entire biography. So what does life actually look like for Stevie Nicks at 77? How she lives now. She lives in a 7,000-square-foot colonial-style home in Pacific Palisades, a wealthy neighborhood in Los Angeles with sweeping canyon views. She bought the property back in 2005 for around $9 million and its value has only risen since then. Comparable properties in the area now sell for between 14 and 20 million. The home is decorated the way you would expect: velvet, lace, candles, layers of texture and warmth. It is less a celebrity showpiece than a personal sanctuary. During the devastating Palisades fires that tore through parts of Los Angeles, Stevie revealed at the Fire Aid benefit concert that her wooden house had survived, even as many of the homes around it were destroyed. She said it with a kind of quiet disbelief. Her daily life is smaller than people imagine. She still does not own a smartphone in any conventional sense. She has described herself as not high-tech at all. She listens to music on old tapes she has been collecting since the 1970s, road tapes she made for tour buses, tapes she put on when she was sick, tapes she leaned on during the darkest moments of her Klonopin years. She does use Spotify and Pandora to discover music, hitting the thumbs up button like someone who genuinely loves the process of finding new songs. She has no husband, no children, no grandchildren running around the house on Sunday afternoons. Her closest companions are her goddaughters, the daughters of friends and bandmates she has watched grow up over the decades. In one of her most revealing and quietly heartbreaking interviews, she said that when she is 90 years old and sitting in a beautiful beach house somewhere, surrounded by her goddaughters, who will by then be middle-aged, she will be just as happy. She said it with confidence, but she also said it with the tone of someone who had rehearsed saying it to themselves a very long time ago. In 2005, she fractured her shoulder and was forced to postpone her North American solo tour by 2 months. She spent weeks at home, largely bedridden, and in a way that surprised even her. What got her through it was music, not performing it, but listening to it. She said the power of music to heal was unlike anything else, that it carried her through the pain on what she called a cloud. One of the most unexpected chapters in Stevie Nicks's later life involves the person she has described as her first love and the love of her life, Lindsey Buckingham. Their split back in 1976 was ugly and personal. Their working relationship inside Fleetwood Mac was famously combustible for decades. And in 2018, after years of tension, Lindsey was fired from the band entirely, a move that Stevie has been connected to, though the full story is complicated. But something shifted with time. In 2025, Stevie and Lindsey announced that their 1973 Buckingham Nicks album, the one that went nowhere when it was first released, the one that represented the beginning of everything, would finally get an official re-release. For the first time ever, it became available on CD and streaming. It was a moment that felt like the closing of a very long circle. Two people who had been everything to each other, romantic partners, creative partners, complicated adversaries, had found a way to do something generous and historical together. Not a reunion tour, not a dramatic press conference, just a quiet acknowledgement that what they made together, at the very beginning, deserved to be heard. The truth about the sad part. There are objectively painful parts. The 8 years lost to Klonopin, the baby that was never born, and the children that were never adopted, the marriage that lasted 3 months, the best friend who died on the day of her greatest triumph, the Lindsey situation, loving someone you cannot be with for 50 years. These are not small things. These are the kinds of losses that define a life. But there is something else, too. Stevie Nicks is 77 years old, and she is still touring, still writing, still filling arenas, still making new music that means something to people. She has sold more records than most artists will ever dream of. She has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once with Fleetwood Mac in 1998, and again as a solo artist in 2019, making her one of the very few people ever to receive that honor both ways. She survived substance. She survived Klonopin. She survived the fracturing of her band and the fracturing of her heart. She checked herself into rehab. Nobody did it for her. She has said, in her more reflective moments, that she discovered something on the other side of all that darkness, that she actually likes herself, with all her moods, with all her contradictions, with the loneliness and the music and the velvet and the goddaughters and the tapes. A woman who has no children but has become, to multiple generations of fans, the closest thing to a musical mother figure that rock and roll has ever produced. A woman who gave up the family she dreamed of, and somehow turned that sacrifice into songs that became part of the fabric of other people's families. That is not entirely sad. It is something more complicated and more human than sad. It is the price of a certain kind of greatness, and Stevie Nicks paid every cent of it. Stevie Nicks is still remembered as one of rock's most iconic voices, but behind the fame and success is a life marked by heartbreak, loneliness, and personal sacrifice. Her journey reveals the true cost of stardom and the strength it took to keep going through it all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about legendary stars and their hidden lives.